I have spent more than half of my life trying to get inside your heads, and primarily focusing on people at the back corners right now as well, because I know what's going on inside your heads, and it's not looking pretty. 26 years ago, it was April 21st, 1992. I was coming up in the elevator in the building that I worked in my first job in a marketing organization. It was a dull, rainy day. I remember it vividly. And I also remember that this coffee in my hand, it smelled like hazelnut. And that kind of made me feel sick because I hate the smell of hazelnut in my coffee. Does anybody like the smell of hazelnut? Outliers. I'll do some statistics on that later. But there was something else that was making me feel sick as well, is I realized that I really hated my job and that I had made a big mistake. You see, I was working on a communication plan for the vice president of a global food company, and I realized that the whole presentation, the whole campaign was more about him, more about the company, more about big ideas, hitting them on the heads with logic than it was about the audience. I went to school to pursue a career in film and psychology because I knew that film had the power to move me emotionally, to move audiences like you emotionally. And now here I was working on a presentation for a food company, and I realized that people were afraid of emotion at that time. That was a long time ago. A lot has changed, and I know you heard some positive things about that yesterday. I would watch this happen over and over again over the next couple of years, and I realized that this would not cut through, that this is not what engagement is. And I am not going to be engaging people like I had hoped for. So in 1997, I haven't aged since then, I know. I have an 18-year-old son in university. I think he looks older than me. I left, started my own company, one that would allow me to experiment, to try new things, to test theories, to kind of push the envelope. We would secretly experiment at the time, collect our own data, unofficially at first. Things like how sound is affecting an audience or an experience, and understanding what is the perfect arousal level for an audience, what is the best beats per minute or BPM of music if we want to curate an experience. 120, by the way, is the answer to that. And we would watch the results and we would see the changes. And what we noticed is that these things would have a cumulative effect on the people we were hoping to connect with. I knew emotion was a driver of influence. But as you can see, I was young. And try seeing how the word emotion would go over in the executive boardrooms throughout North America at that time of my career. So I had to look for a different approach. In the past 26 years, this has been a journey of discovery for me, seeking to understand what causes really low return on investment when it comes to peer-to-peer, face-to-face human interaction. Ultimately turning to neuroscience, psychology, AI, machine learning, and beyond that, to find real solutions that will cut through and right throughout the engagement process. We have now built a bank of research. We have specialists, technology applications that range throughout experience and communications and events such as this. And at the same time, I set out to try to find ways to measure what we were doing, because science is about cause and effect. This led me to what we call neuroscaping. This is the merging of brain sciences, behavioral sciences, research, and development in order to do anything we can to improve engagement experiences. Scaping experience design, communication, marketing strategies, and beyond with the help of science, and a lot of it. Seeking the most subtle of ways to cut through. We're getting down to the neurons in the work that we do, and we don't always realize that. Because there is a lot that stands in the way of those you're trying to connect with. So in the next little while, I want to share with you some insights. Some of these things you might find pretty obvious and that you maybe are well aware of, but what you need to understand that it's an interplay, an interaction between a lot of things that are always at play when we put together plans and strategies. And I also want to show you how we can move the needle. It seems to be a popular term here, in order to improve what is elusively return on engagement. There are three things that we're going to look at. If I hit the button. And it's not going to the next slide. Now we're getting disengaged. I think it just has to, we need a little help in the back just to move it forward to the next slide. You can take this moment to have a restorative effect on your brain. Just a little bit of nature. We're going to talk about that in a minute as well. It's not connecting. What's that?
Just say if you want
Yeah, next slide. If they can cue that. Will they, bear with me one sec. Will they be able to afford the preview, please? There we go. We're going to look at three things. So that's actually a good example of how people can become disengaged, and that's when you have to do the dance. But we're going to look at the challenges that we face connecting with the minds of people today in this world, which are increasing at an exponential pace. We're going to also see what we can do to combat some of these challenges to begin, again, as I said, moving the needle, and how science and technology will continue to disrupt and improve our opportunities for future engagement. Next slide, please. Is it working?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Ta-da! There we go. We all know there's great value with improving engagement. Research shows how better connection leads to dramatically improved results. This is not news for us in this room. But the more we can navigate with precision and understanding, even greater our outcomes for these improvements will become. Because we tend to attack the challenge of engagement in most of the real world with creative. Wonderful creative in many cases. We have to try to overpower distraction that rests at the gateway to the mind, or outnoise the competition. Yet what we don't realize is that we're dealing with a different competition, one that is very elusive and constantly evolving. The real competition of what stands in the way of customer and human connection, which is up here. Connection's not this easy. In business-to-business experiences, for example, where I really began my journey, and from aggregating vast amounts of research studies back with our team, we determined that based on common markers, focus, attention, retention, that the average return on investment of an experience could be as low as 24 to 32% of your original investment. It's pretty poor. But that leaves a wonderful opportunity for us to fix this through the use and implementation of science and understanding of the human mind. Because it's not just about great copy or great creative or compelling copy, because we'll all come across the same barriers eventually that we're going to face. And I want to look at that right now, because there is immense competition at the gateway to the human mind. So to properly engage, we have to cross over many psychological barriers. And to maximize return on investment, we need to minimize cognitive costs on those that we are connecting or communicating with or trying to transfer information to. So let's look at a few examples of some that might seem quite common sense to you at first. Everyone we hope to transfer information to has essentially this force field around their mind of distraction, constantly orbiting. You have a phone in your pocket, you don't even have to be looking at it, it's distracting you. And we're continually uncovering more challenges as we go. And as we look at these common areas of trouble, it is important to understand how everything interconnects as well. Because what might work for one could also negatively affect another challenge. And this is critical for the design of programming. Let me ask, how many of you are thinking about something else, other than that moment of time where we had a little technical challenge? Thinking about something else in the last 5 minutes. And it's okay, you can raise your hands, because I'm mind-wandering right now. And actually, in most cases, it's a good thing. You've been taking in a lot of information today. Your brain's working hard to consolidate that information. And there's a lot of reasons, but this is a really high number, and these are the ones that I wanted to show and highlight today, because these are things we have to constantly be aware of anytime we're presenting, anytime we're creating a communication for any purpose to transfer information, training modules. The greatest reason for mind wandering is usually short-term gratification, thinking about something that will make you feel good, or things that are more important, like your kids at home, your work, or maybe what you're going to have to drink after 6 o'clock tonight. That's what I was mind-wandering about, by the way. And then 30 to 40% of that is unintentional. You don't know you're doing it. Your brain is a big, lazy organism that is consuming the most energy in your body, and it's going to find ways to just conserve energy wherever possible. And you'll see a little bit more on that shortly. The good news is, though, is that we can easily get back some of that lost focus and attention. And recent research is showing that with simple changes to incentivization strategies, for example, which I'll talk more about in a moment, we can capture back and recapture at least 18% of that. So that's very positive news. Strategic incentivization can pay huge dividends, not just face-to-face, but in online as well. And online behavioral machine learning that we're working with right now can also figure out and determine where to incent more effectively and better based on the individuals that are responding or engaging online. So there's a lot to look forward to. Good question for this time of day. Who feels tired? It's probably a higher ratio than 40% today, so it was a little bit of research we just did. If 40% of the population is fatigued, then it's critical that we expect to have to deal with this and deal with that challenge. We need to understand how fatigue also affects our cognitive functioning and how it can be managed better or avoided. Time of day that we choose to do things, for example, or schedule certain activities for learning and retention. And when we talk about fatigue, we're talking about a lack of energy and a lack of positive emotion as well, which leads to poor attention and diminished cognitive performance. Sounds pretty obvious, doesn't it? So what it means, though, in simple terms, is it'll take more energy of you to have to convert somebody over to an idea or a customer when they're operating and functioning in that realm. And as motivation can help mind wandering, it cannot help you with fatigue. When people are fatigued, they have less attention and they're mentally less ambitious. And what we can do is help them by balancing arousal levels at the appropriate times and managing that. And arousal levels are very interesting when it comes to live experiences, a very interesting area of study for us of what is an ideal arousal level. And we mean arousal in the scientific term, not the way it's used at home. And if we come on too strong when somebody is fatigued, we're going to lose them almost immediately. Has anybody seen a Michael Bay Transformers movie, by chance? You've raised your hand twice. You're paying attention. You would know what I mean by cognitive fatigue, and actually something we're going to touch on now, cognitive overload. Because transferring too much information too quickly when people are under these stress states will lead to what we know as cognitive overload. This is your brain on content. The more we take on, the more it fills up until it reaches a point where it's no longer consolidating and processing information effectively. So it therefore spills out. You're not going to retain this. We all can understand this. Even if we're producing shorter content, and the trends that we see, shorter content modules they just end up getting stacked up in time, is going to ultimately lead to cognitive overload. So what we have to do is manage the flow. And we need to provide restoration. Not necessarily like this, but I figure 45 seconds of this is going to help restore some of that load and build up in your mind. And that's all it takes. And that's science. So this is just for fun. This is a gift for you, actually. But you know, simple things like this were a difficult sell to engineer into live experiences not that long ago. Here, now, you see this much more frequently. In fact, in spaces even like this, engineering greenery into the space provides that type of effect for you. So if you're feeling a little bit full, step outside for 45 seconds. We're also capable of synchronizing the minds of all of you in this room right now. In this case, on the theta frequency. So a little bit more openness. And if that helps us by 1%, we will try anything possible to raise that elusive ROI on this program. And birdsong, by the way, also causes the brain to vibrate in the theta range, opening the gateway ever so slightly. So now that we have your attention back, I got to work fast. We have unlimited cognitive resources. That is a working theory. But we cannot control them really well. And as smart as we are, our brain is eventually going to switch into autopilot at a certain point because you can only handle so much information. You're going to mind wander, as some of you may have done, and then your brain is not going to come back until it decides to, or you tell it to. Ultimately, you're more likely to be distracted than focused. And we obviously want to leave a positive experience. This one is fascinating, and a very recent study that this team concluded that memories can actually change. And we're actually working now with a lot of researchers on memory alone, and that can be a whole other session on how memory can change. You can walk out after this experience right now, talk to somebody, and change your actual memory of what you just experienced. We all obviously want to leave a positive mark. And often we think about short-term gratification, you know, when we go on our phones or we tap out, but we don't think about the long-term effect of that on an experience. So as designers, we have to find ways to reduce that opportunity of you checking out on your phone. And this is the same in all interactions. So we see these challenges. What can we do? Cognitive challenges, as I mentioned a moment ago, group together. They interact. How do we navigate these to get closer to the front of the line in the mind of those you want to connect with? Having a basic understanding of what I just talked to you about can help us as we design future engagement. So I'm going to just share with you little bits and pieces that we can cover in this short amount of time. But it can also be in the simplest ways. Remember at the beginning, you experienced what we call the inner voice experience. Did any of you hear your own voice? So it's a simple strategy to connect and open up your mind. If you pay attention, you would have heard it was pretty quiet in the room during that time. We're using about 12 psychological strategies in that very simple experience. And we've tested it across the world now with very difficult audiences as well, and found that used in a sequence of other strategies becomes very, very effective in overpowering all of those challenges I've just shown you previously. It's about curating an experience for the mind, which changes the way we think. So let's look at some of those psychological strategies in a brief moment of time. We know motivation reduces mind wandering. So we cater to shorter attention spans. It's just a fact. Everything that we do when we develop content has to cater to shorter attention spans. Shorter the time between reinforcements when we incentivize will actually improve the drive, will strengthen the drive of the individual to finish the task at hand and fuel that behavior. Injecting more of the unexpected, like we talk about, you know, the green break you saw a moment ago, just to disrupt autopilot. And like music can lull, so can design. So very simple things that we even do and engineer, and I'm going to share some of where the future's going in a moment, is palette changes of color. Very simple, subtle things that don't add to cognitive fatigue, but actually create and remind the mind to come back to the task at hand. Varying design stimuli can recapture attention very effectively. Good designers understand this, but too much, again, of anything can become more distracting and contribute, as I said earlier, to other factors that can be negative. So remember balance. Too much of anything can be a bad thing. Combating cognitive fatigue. Restorative breaks. You're likely somewhat fatigued by the time I came out here. You've had a busy day and taken a lot of information, but engineered into live and online experiences can pay great dividends and aid in reducing that fatigue and improving things like retention. And they also, as I mentioned, can disrupt autopilot. In live experiences with content structure, we look at things like the 10-minute rule Apple uses, where the brain will eventually just tap out at 10 minutes, switch it up, even voice change at that time, or a task change we talk about, injecting a visual bumpers do wonders to focus people back. And any of these strategies work, whether they're online or in a venue. Matching expertise level, again, this seems really obvious, but it's about ensuring your content matches. If I came in here and talked about, really, I lose it when our neuroscience researchers talk to me, and I like that stuff, but it just will eventually fatigue. Too challenging of anything over time will lead to fatigue. So, another point, when content goes over somebody's head, it's gone. And what about attention decline?
Hey guys, I'm Brock Edwards, Neuroscaping researcher at Debut. Today I want to talk to you about varying communication mediums and what that can do for the persuasiveness of your message. By changing movement or characteristics of stimuli, in this case, me being on a screen instead of you looking at Ben, this improves the way you process the message. You process it more deeply, improving your ability to retain the information that I'm saying and improving the persuasiveness of the message.
See, we have a lot of young-looking people in our office. And Brock is an honors neuroscientist and does some of our fascinating aggregation of studies. Movement promotes focus. As physical movement does, movement for the mind is the same. It reorients attention. So we mix up tasks. It allows people to perform better. And distraction is simply unavoidable. Strong themes and content arcs are also critical in marketing strategies or presentation strategies because it allows the person that zoned out of the program to come back in and pick up easily where they left off. See, it's a lot of little things that we can do to create that cumulative effect, as I talked about. An information gap, something online social strategists know very well to basically clickbait you along. The brain seeks curiosity. It's a very powerful tool, creating gaps in training programs to psychologically entice them to move on. With an incentivization strategy, increases the overall performance. We are cataloging such an abundance of research that we can leverage to help us win the battle for attention, one incremental step at a time. It requires diligence and focus, though. And we are continually having to try to outsmart how the brain is evolving so rapidly. We invest so much time and energy into engaging the minds, but how do we really know what the true impact is of the work that we do, of the emotional connection that we want to make with that audience? Measurement is primarily after the fact, and even if it's throughout an experience, we're not analyzing it until after the fact, at which point it's too difficult to change the trajectory or the outcomes. So what does the future impact of engagement look like? Two American researchers said, when they published in the paper of measure of emotion in the Journal of Cognition and Emotion, and they said from an intuitive layperson's perspective, it should be easy to determine the emotional state of an individual, of what somebody is of an emotion that an individual is experiencing. However, scientific evidence suggests that measuring a person's emotional state is one of the most vexing problems in effective science. That was 2009, mind you, and things have come a long way since then. So measuring the impact of what we do is a challenge, one that we are feverishly working on to overcome. We understand intuitively the power of emotional connection plays in the world in which we operate. We go home from our busy lives, our jobs, and we immerse ourselves in things that emotionally stimulate us with our family, our friends. We watch movies, we listen to music, we interact, we tell stories. Those pathways are different from the logical. Those pathways end up here. Do me a favor for a second and put your hand on your heart. Focus on what you feel. It doesn't have to be a heartbeat, but just focus on what you feel for a moment. Now what I want you to do is turn to a person next to you and look them straight in the eyes, if you can, with your hand on your heart. Now focus on what you feel. It may be very subtle, and you maybe fell in love. We move people through experiences hoping to influence this. And we can measure this feedback. And it's not just heart rate, it's a little more complicated. But with technology, we now have the ability to dramatically improve engagement, to actually monitor energy levels, arousal levels, and other markers in real time and intervene where necessary, so that we can literally change the trajectory of an audience experience, to measure down to the microsecond how an audience collectively responds to stimuli, and as an individual may respond in other ways. Could you imagine if I could look down and see a calibrated measure of all of you? I would have seen it probably drop during the moment my slides weren't forwarding, but that meant that I would have to intervene to bring you back to an optimum level. So what we can do is ensure that you have the best income, or we have the best opportunity to transfer information as effectively and efficiently as possible into your minds, so that we're also being as kind to you mentally as humanly possible. And with the help of AI, leaps are being made in real-time analytics. We put that over a machine learning platform. We can rule out where one might be thinking of something other than me up here at this moment, and we can watch and manage and get more quality data in return in order to develop more effective experiences going forward. Even online, and IBM has been working on this very well, as systems that can even determine if a respondent, for example, to a training program is possibly experiencing fatigue, then what can happen? The platform can interact in real time to maybe inject some restoration like the green break that you saw, or change the timing of modules, just to map itself more appropriately to the mind that it's working with. So very exciting times. And it's an exciting time for us as neuroengineers and designers, because our vision is to continually blur the line between experience and measurement, engagement and measurement, and a seamless loop, so to speak, watching the impact of experience design in real time, as I just mentioned, and having the effect to change course of action, to better manage the flow and engineer more meaningful connection to those we hope to connect with. All of us in this room have the ability to dramatically improve every facet of engagement through better understanding and awareness of what goes on in this evolving mind, to continue to adapt to the way we approach communication, experience design, to be more effective than ever before, to stand up and combat all of these ever-increasing distractions that impede our connection with those minds, again, that we want to connect, increasing the value and the return on engagement that our customers, our clients, and us as humans seek. Because in reality, we're all event scientists. And together, we can change the trajectory of where things are going in the battle for attention. Thank you very much.